Okay, so we're ready when you are, Matt.
Okay, this open meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee Facilities Subcommittee is being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020 in response to the COVID pandemic and enacted into law by Section 20 of Chapter 20 of Acts of 2021 and the provisions extended through March 31st, 2025 by fiscal year 2023 supplemental budget signed by Governor Healy on March 29, 2023. These provisions suspend the requirement for an open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed to encourage to participate remotely. I hereby call to order the meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee Facilities Subcommittee on Friday, August 16th at 12:35 p.m. I am Matthew Landers, I chair of the Facilities Subcommittee. I would like to confirm that all members in person anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Narissa Wallen.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Staff, when I call your name, please please respond in the affirmative. Brian Forget.
Here and I can hear you.
Superintendent, sorry. School Business Manager
Brian.
Ryan Perry.
Yep, no, I'm here. I can hear you. Thank you.
High School Principal Patrick Kelly.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Facilities Director John, I'm going to butcher this, Skoloki.
Here and I can hear you.
I'll get it eventually, sorry. And then Newbury Representative Alicia Greco.
I'm here and I can hear you.
And then we have two people from
so it's
Habib.
Kevin Provencher
Hello?
and Julia O'Grady, right? Did I get your last name right?
Yes, you got that right, and
All
I can
right.
hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, and now I think the first thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the May 31st subcommittee meeting?
I will make that motion.
Second. Oh yeah, roll call vote. Sorry, it's the sum I'm getting. Narissa?
I said yes. Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. And then the next item on our agenda is developing the building options. Oh, did I skip over oral communication from the public? And I think I missed, yeah.
I'm looking at the participants. I don't see any public here, so you did, but it's okay.
Okay. All right, so the next item on the agenda is developing building options.
All right, I'll jump in here. So again, the last time we met, I believe it was May 31st, is that what the minutes we just approved, was we walked away with, Kevin was at that meeting, not Julia, but what the next steps were to do, I think Kevin called it a fit test, right? We know if we're going MSBA, which I will say since we last met, I did learn from the new Mary Piketty, the new executive director, that there are a total of 47 total core applications for this year. And that looking at the history, that's the lowest number that there's been in 15 plus years. So that's good news. Certainly not a sure thing, but we still are continuing down that path, waiting that answer late November, early December. But in the process of, or the goal of developing a plan B, should we either hear no in December, or because we like it as a better alternative, we wanted to develop this plan B. So the last time we met, the charge for Kevin was to have him and his team determine if per the standards, does this building give us the capacity to meet the needs that we currently and project having. So that was the first thing. So we'll have Kevin and Julia share that. And then the second thing for them to answer, the question to answer is, okay, so depending on that, what kind of a capacity within the building, not capacity, wrong word, what type of options do we have within the building to actually renovate? We keep talking about this big concrete bunker. How much flexibility do we actually have to move walls, to rethink spaces, or are we really confined to concrete and steel? So that's the second question. And then from there, my question to the group will be, so based on that information that they'll share, what are our priorities moving forward as we start to look at what the possibilities might be? So that's the hope for today, is for them to walk away, for us to walk away with a clear picture of what's possible, and for them to walk away, Kevin and Julia, to walk away with a sense of what we're looking to accomplish in this Plan B alternative. So that sound like a good plan? Okay, I
Yes.
see nods.
Well
So
well
I'll,
said.
to share that, just so you both know, Kevin and Julia, they on our public posting, we have posted what did we include? We included the report that you did. That's a space needs, and then that MLP design education suitability report. We have both
Yes.
of those linked on the agenda, so we have both of those PDFs.
Yeah. Yeah, so our exercise was to conduct what we call a space needs assessment. And this is a process where we look at the existing building and how each space in the building is utilized. And so we identify the use space by space. And we simply just use, the building plans for that, which we have. And then I think we passed that back maybe once to you, Brian, and you made a few adjustments of some spaces that we didn't get quite right. And then we prepare these color diagrams, which we'll put up on the screen in a minute, to show how the spaces are utilized graphically. And then what we do is we measure the area of each space and compare it to the MSBA standards. So in MSBA core project, let's say we're building a new school building, we would be using those area targets. And then what we're going to see is a comparison between those targets, so that's a benchmark, and how that compares with what we have here at Triton. And so we can draw some conclusions from that, but I think it's probably better that we just sort of look at the work. And Julia, are you able to share the let's start with the floor diagrams.
You're muted. Just, do you want to share your screen, or I just
Yeah.
dropped in the chat
Yeah.
the link to
Oh.
this? Okay, let me hang on a second.
Let me
just
see. I haven't been in this format in a while. Let me see if I can share my screen.
You should be
At the-
able
at the
to.
bottom of the window
There's a share button.
should have a green button that lights up at the
I
bottom.
see. Okay.
There it is.
Okay.
We are all seeing it now.
Yeah.
Okay. So this, so this is the colored floor plan, which this is the ground level, and it's color coded for the uses. We have a ground floor, a main floor, and the upper level. It shows the middle school area dashed, and then the shared area with a heavier dashed line.
Which would be the auditorium and the cafeteria. Correct?
Yes. Yep.
So this gives us a pretty good snapshot of how the building is used. And what we take from this is we count up what we call teaching stations. And teaching stations is typically a classroom, right? But it could be another space in the building that's used for education. And we tally all this up, and we've broken this down to the middle school and the high school, so you can see the columns there on the right-hand side chart. And then in the middle of the middle school and the high school are some shared spaces, the cafeteria and the auditorium. So the the key spaces in the school program are listed in the left-hand column. So a core academic space is typically a classroom. It's where instruction takes place. We have science classrooms. We have the media center, which is the libraries, gymnasiums, cafeteria we mentioned, and then we have art, music. We did see some rooms that were shop rooms. Not sure we got that quite right, but I think there are some shops. The auditorium, and then at the bottom there, we've identified the spaces that are being used for special education. So the MSBA targets are in the second column. So where it says target square footage per MSBA guidelines. Those are the area targets that are recommended by the MSBA. So a core academic space in the high school, for example, 825 to 950 square feet. In middle school, it's a little bit larger, not quite sure why, but 850 to 950. And so you can read down the column and see, what those benchmarks look like. So then what we do is we measure all of the spaces. We calculate the area of each space that you saw on the color diagrams. And we simply just determine whether it meets or does not meet the benchmark square footage that's defined by the MSBA. And so you'll see two columns for the middle school, two for the high school. The one on the left identifies the number of spaces that meet the guidelines. Column on the right, which is colored red, identifies the spaces that do not meet the guidelines. And you can see for the core academic spaces, in almost every case, they do not meet the guidelines. Some other conclusions I think we could draw from this. The science classrooms really do appear to be undersized. They're probably 2/3 the size that they should be. And that's consistent with Brian mentioned the educational suitability report that was prepared by MLP back in 2022. We've reviewed that report, we've studied it, and a lot of the comments that we see about the science classroom are consistent with having space that's undersized. The media center, it should be clear that the middle school media center is very small. Where is that one, Julia?
It's this space
Yeah,
here.
yeah. So at the middle school, that's really really undersized. The recommended benchmark is 2,680 square feet, and we've got 827. So that's pretty small. But then over at the high school, the benchmark is 3,650 square feet, and we're over 10,000, right? And we've heard the comments before that the library is there's a lot of space and volume in there that's not being utilized. It's oversized, for its use. It might be 3 times the size that it needs to be.
That's this area as we designate it media center.
So, this shows that the core academic spaces are undersized by the guidelines. However, they average about 750 square feet. Julia, I think is kind of what we
Yes.
round numbers, 750.
Mhm.
So not that far off. So I would not, look at that red column and say we've got a problem. We don't see a problem. And the reason why is it's not that far off. And if we go to the bottom of the chart, we compare the enrollments. So we've got 314 students at the middle school, 567 in the high school. We're able to calculate the operating capacity of each school with some basic assumptions. So at the bottom, we're assuming that there's 23 students per classroom, but that the utilization rate for the teaching spaces is probably 75% because students are moving from room to room with each period. And there will be times when teaching spaces are not being utilized at all. There may be no teaching happening in that space at that given time. So we can calculate the operating capacity of each school. So the middle school capacity is 500 and the high school is 656. So in total, both schools combined, it's 1100 to 1200 students is the potential capacity. So what all of this means is that there's room to spare, right? We've got excess capacity. We have more room that we really need. And even though we might find that some of the teaching spaces are undersized by the guidelines, I don't think that necessarily means that there's a problem. And I don't think there is a problem. So I think the next steps, and Brian described it well, is what do we do with this information and where do we go from here? So we did take a look at how the building is put together structurally, because if we're talking about potentially reconfiguring some spaces, to create some larger teaching spaces, we need to have a general sense of, how much of that can we really do based on how the building is built. And our preliminary conclusion is that at least in the older part of the building, it's a reinforced concrete frame. The newer part is a steel frame. But the walls that separate the classrooms from each other do not appear to be structural walls, and they could be potentially removed. So,
Hey, Kevin.
yeah.
Sorry, before you go on, can I ask a couple questions
Of
about
course.
the chart? Because it seems like you're moving totally on in the report. I just wanted to, if we could.
Yeah.
I guess I have two questions.
Yeah.
One of them is this kind of caught my eye with the media center sizing and then looking at, the classrooms being underneath. So I happen to know that the media center in the middle school actually used to be a classroom itself. So it used to be the middle school and the high school shared the high school library, which is, I think, why it's oversized for what it is right now in part, but it's also just a gigantic room for library books. But then that made me wonder, when you said the average classroom size is 750 roughly, and I'm looking at this 827 number and just thinking, like, are we looking at some classrooms that are right under the limit and some that are way under the limit to get to that average 750? Like, are there some classrooms that are way significantly undersized to get to that average?
I don't believe so. I'm looking at the data that we got from the MLP
Okay.
and report, and that's where I got my square footages from.
Okay.
And I jotted them down into my plan. There are no classrooms that I see that are very, very tiny. They range from, I want to say, like 723 to 827, with actually some of the SPED classrooms are larger. Like one of the SPED classrooms is 935 square
Okay.
feet. So there are no, from what I can see, there are no very tiny classrooms.
Okay. That's good. And my
Yeah.
I
other
was just gonna say, when
one-
we did that exercise with Mike Perillo, with Patrick and Al, there are certainly smaller spaces, 300 square feet, 250
Yes.
square feet, that are smaller in group instructions. But
Okay.
when we say classrooms, we're assuming we're bringing a whole class in whether the
Okay.
class is 12 or 25. So.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure based on those numbers that we didn't have a lot that were, or a big range, I guess.
No.
My other question for you is, I don't know if you have this, do you have a sense based on either our current enrollment or our operating capacity of about how many special education classrooms, because that's been kind of a question that's been ongoing, how many special education classrooms we should have to serve the population that we have, which obviously every population is different, but I didn't know if there's sort of, in that the MSBA has a recommended footage range. Is there sort of an average or a standard as far as special ed classrooms for the population?
Yeah, the MSBA does define some benchmark target areas with Julie, if you want to go back to the chart, I think we have
Sure.
that listed. So, there are three types of sped spaces, depending on the number of students, that are being accommodated. So, a 250 square foot might be 1 to 2 students. And, if you're doing larger groups, you would use larger rooms. It just depends on, what services are being provided. So I don't know if there really is a rule of thumb or a recommendation on how many that you should have, because the needs are, I mean, you said it, the needs are going to be different in every community depending on the population that you're serving. But, the general impression, and Julia, tell me if you agree or disagree, is based on the quantity of sped spaces that you have, it seems to be more than adequate.
That's my general feeling.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Alicia, did you have a question?
Yes. Does this assume class size will be no larger than 25 students per class?
This assumes 23 to 24 students per class, so a little bit less.
Okay. And what are the chances that you may have a class go over, especially at the high school, go over that size?
We have that, in certain places, but it's not something that's super common currently. And right now, when we have a class of that's 25 or more, everyone still fits. It's just tighter. It's obviously better for our classes that are, 20 or less. But it's not, I don't see it as being prohibitive.
So if they have, do you have capacity to grow? Let's just say a couple of the towns put in a couple of this housing developments with this new MBTA housing that the state has pushed through. Do you have room to make it another classroom if you need to?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers show that, that in the aggregate, in the whole, that there should be more than enough room to add students to the population.
Alicia, one of the things that Kevin mentioned at the start was that at any given point in time, we probably have 25% of our rooms. I don't know if it's quite that high. I'd say probably about 20% of our rooms that are unused because it's a teacher's prep period and there's no class in there that period. It's a study hall and there's no class in there. The study hall's in a different location. So if we needed to, we could be more creative in our scheduling so that rooms were shared. It's pretty common practice across most of the state, especially when you're going through a building project, people end up sharing spaces, but hasn't been something that's been a reality here just based on the size of the school and the way we use the building.
Okay, thank you.
So the high schools, the middle school and the high school are seeing the dip now, that the bubble, if you will, that went through the elementary schools. So the elementaries had small classes. Those it's not the COVID year yet, but that was already dipping down. So those bubbles are now moving up into the high school, in middle school. So we have smaller enrollments. And then on the other side, we currently have at Newbury's the town that's growing. All of a sudden, we have 65 students registered for kindergarten in Newbury. And it's been in the 30s to 40, 42 the past few years. So Newbury's now got the bubble the other way. But I think when we get to the next step and we say, okay, what are the needs? What do we all believe are our kind of pet project needs of things we want to make sure that any plan has? For me, it's making sure it's scalable, looking to the future so we don't land with where we are at Pine Grove, where we have awesome space per the design and the way we did that with the breakouts. But we moved down to 3 classrooms per grade level, and we can't grow back to 4 classes per grade level without spending money. So it's making sure that when we move forward with whatever plans we're doing, we have those spaces that it may not be the ideal design, but that it might be, you know, a classroom that's designed as something cool and fun and unique. But when push comes to shove, if we need an extra classroom, we've got a 795 square foot typical classroom that we can turn back into a classroom for no money. So that will getting a cart before the horse, but just to make sure that has to be something we're ready for, Alicia. I think that's a good point you raise.
Okay. And the core academic classrooms are 700. What about the science classrooms? Are they, it says the target square footage is 41440, and where
Right.
did you not get, am I getting ahead of myself? I'm
So
sorry.
that would be,
No,
again,
not at all.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think, Julia, they were around 1,000 square feet.
They are around 1,000 square
Yeah.
feet. And so their deficit is, in my mind, more than the core classrooms, because they're around 1,000 and we look to have about 1,400 square feet. So they're quite a bit smaller.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then, you know, there's the prep rooms that are in addition, you know, to that. So typically, you know, two science classrooms share a prep room, but that deficit that Julia mentioned is consistent with a lot of the comments that we read in the MLP report concerning the science classrooms. There was a lot of concern about inadequate room to do lab bench work, and, you know, not enough room for chemical storage, prep spaces. So, I mean, I think looking to the future, you know, I think we need to think about what are the 21st century teaching, you know, practices here that we want to see at Triton. And I think, you know, there's flexibility of use of space, but there's also could be a need for having a larger teaching space so that students could break out into, you know, smaller groups, do group work, do individual work. We saw a lot of comments about that. So just things to think about, you know, as we take this to the next space, because I think we have some opportunities here to create, you know, some types of spaces that might not exist that would really be, you know, great teaching spaces.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So where did we leave off? So you were sharing, I feel like you were sharing something. Was there another?
The floor plans.
No, yeah, I think we've gone through everything, Brian.
Okay. So as far as so I should say, are there any other questions about it? And again, I think to Kevin's point, I would reiterate, I think a classroom that's 725 square feet isn't worth spending a whole lot of time renovating and moving walls, dollars and time to move walls to get 825, right? I think from a standpoint, the next question is, what capacity do we have to move, add, delete walls in the interior? And then that second question is, what is it? What are the most pressing issues? We've named two of them. Science labs and scalability for the future. What are the guide rails that we want to give them to start coming up with potential alternatives that they can kind of play around with ideas? So Kevin, and Julia, we had talked about the fact that we do have the ability to move some interior walls. Can you talk to that a bit?
Yeah, yes, yeah. Yeah, so what we're talking about is, you know, in a typical classroom wing, we have what we call a double loaded corridor, right? And it's simply just, and Julia can wave on it, but, you know, it's simply a corridor with classrooms on two sides. I don't see any compelling reason to change that. But the walls that separate the classrooms from each other, like those walls, those could potentially be removed or relocated to make a space larger or smaller, right? So we can slide those around to create some new types of spaces, you know, depending on what we decide the academic, you know, program should be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you were saying to me, and again, you did not come in here with fully re-engineer things, but based on drawings and all of the prints you have, you believe the majority of those cinder block walls between classrooms are not load bearing. That gives us the capacity to move as needed.
That's the impression, yeah. We haven't done a full structural analysis, but at a glance, that's what it looks like to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Alicia, do you have a question?
Are you talking about making these, let's just say for the sake of the conversation, you're gonna remove that wall that you have the ellipse around right now.
Yeah.
You're gonna remove that wall, you're gonna combine those spaces. Is that gonna be permanent? Or is that gonna be something that you can move? Like I'm thinking in the old days of when you had a conference room and the accordion things went up and down.
Yep. So this isn't a proposal. This is to answer the question I had asked was, are we able to move walls? The idea would be to resize spaces. So if we had where Julia was, you've got that circle, right? So if we wanted to turn that current classroom, that's 3 classrooms, into 2 larger science labs, making it up. They believe from their engineering study, and again, not full engineering analysis, but based on the drawings, that those 2 current interior walls that are separating into 3 classrooms could be relocated to 1 and create that space. The idea would not be, we're not going back to the 80s with open concept and open, right, with the accordion walls, and let's all just learn in 1 big square foot, you know, 1,000
So
square
I
foot
guess
space.
my question is this something that's going to be a permanent solution or is it gonna be a changeable solution?
It would be a permanent solution. What we're talking about is redesigning the spaces. And again, we haven't talked yet about what the priorities are. This was an exercise to say, do we have any capacity to rethink the space in the building as it stands now? Again, if we get accepted into the MSBA, we have no choice. We have to study everything. That's part of the partnership with them. What we're saying is, okay, as a plan B, if we're doing this on our own, do we even have the ability, or are we stuck with what we have?
Yeah.
Their analysis just said there's some flexibility. If we say we want, you know, the 4 science labs, we want them to be that 1,400 square foot space.
Right.
That gives them the ability to say, oh, I can move walls and figure things out. But this would be rebuilding, redesigning, rebuilding the building as a permanent solution.
Okay. That was my question. Is this gonna be permanent or temporary permanent?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Kevin, I had a question, not necessarily thinking about, well, thinking too about the interior walls, but the walls that are on the, like, where the lockers would be in the hallways. If we were to do away with lockers on either side of the hallways, would we be able to widen classrooms by 3 feet?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably.
because the building structure appears to be a frame, which means that there are columns and beams, and the walls that go in between those columns are typically not structural, so they can be moved. And that may also be the case in the corridor. So you could recover some space potentially from removing the lockers.
Because I want to say I probably have 600 or 700 unused lockers each day.
Yeah. well,
That's what we
not-
hear that over and
Not
over again.
surprising that they're not being used.
Funny story. So Pentucket rebuilt their whole place, no lockers. They put in day lockers. My son, who was a student at the time, was like, "Oh my gosh, they're not giving us lockers. We can't do anything." I'm like, "How often do you use your locker?" It's like, "Well, I never use it, but," and so literally, like, even the day lockers don't get used. So
Yeah.
I would support that, getting rid of lockers.
Yeah, and another thing to keep in mind is, we'll be doing accessibility updates, right? As we do this work, we're obligated to do that. And in the older part of the building, the entries to the classrooms do not meet the accessibility requirements. They don't have the proper clearances around the doors. And I think, we would find things like that all over the building. So, if we're taking out lockers and we're making changes to, for accessibility, then those corridor walls are pretty much gone, right? Right, Patrick? That was your question, Patrick?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I think we could probably recoup several feet on each side of a hallway, not make the hallway feel any narrower,
Yeah.
and have wider classrooms.
Yeah, I like it. There we go.
So then we'd be, again, we're talking down the road as we talk about what we would hope for. The question would be, what does that add for cost, right? And is that something in a new building you accomplish and it's affordable in a redesign, or is it unaffordable? So I think those are the discussions we get to have as we talk about kind of
Absolutely.
what we can and can't do.
There's a cost associated with everything, and the walls that we remove to gain that area, they have to be rebuilt,
Yeah.
right? So there's a cost for that. So
We al-
those are
We
all.
also have to look at the structural implication that might bring about.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that what we'll find though is that there's a row of columns in the corridor and a row of columns at the perimeter.
Mm.
You can kind of see where those bumps,
Hmm.
Mm.
right? Those are likely the columns right there.
So those are likely the structures
Yeah.
that would
Exactly.
be structural.
Yep.
Yeah. So that could end up.
So they
limiting.
line up with all those bubbles that you see at the top with the numbers 30, 31, 32.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So those could not be moved. So to your point, Patrick, a lot of those lockers are filling in the spaces between
In between.
those bump outs.
Yeah.
So if we couldn't move those beams, then, or posts, whichever they are, they're posts, then columns, then that would kind of nullify that. But so we're saying, I think the bottom line here, I feel like we're jumping into the exciting stuff, like what can you do?
Yeah.
Right.
I think
So
you're getting a little bit ahead. I think.
yeah. So we answered the question, right? This building has possibility, right? This isn't a building where we're saying, no, you're stuck with it. Everything's concrete. You can't move walls. Let's just do fit and finish. So if we're saying that, then I think the question for this group is, this is kind of the exciting part where we finally get to talk about, okay, what are we looking for? What do we want to do? I think it's a sunk and safe assumption that every bit of mechanical, electrical, water service, everything, right? Building envelope, soup to nuts, that has to be part of any renovation. We need an entire new building on it. We want the kind of Pine Grove treatment of, we want to start with assuming that all of the infrastructure is brand new and the building envelope all redone. Aside from that, what are, as we, and this is, we're still thinking high level. If we were getting into actual designing This would be a much longer and much more involved process. But for this exercise, to give Kevin and Julia a charge to say, okay, as we're thinking about potential options, what are the boxes aside from we know we need to update all of the mechanics and the building envelope? What are the other things that we want to accomplish? And I think this is a chance for us to share that with them, to give them some guidance on where to start peeling back the onion and seeing what we can do. Does that work, Kevin? Or is there a specific format, or is it just ideas at this point helpful?
I think, I think we need to hear, what those ideas are, right? What are the types of spaces that are lacking that we think that we're going to need? If we want to update our teaching practices, do we need different types of spaces, larger spaces? Labs we talked about, does the art room need more room? I mean, all of those things is, we can't, we can't prescribe that. I mean, I think that has to come from you based on your feedback about what you're seeing in your school and what you think your educational program is going to look like, well into the future.
Yeah.
So we need a little bit of programming, I think. I mean, I think the infrastructure topic, and I agree with Brian, is that's our first priority. That's going to take the first chunk of our budget. We've done the facilities condition assessment, so we have some idea of what the needs are and what they could cost. But outside of that, with the room that's left in the budget, what do we want to do with it? I mean, certainly upgrading finishes, absolutely. But are there other types of spaces, that we want to target to maybe do things a little bit differently? And we really need, that needs to come, from you. I mean, we can help you along, but the educational program really comes from you.
So I'll kick it off, right? So we've already said science labs, absolutely.
Okay.
Need to bring them into the 21st century. And we said scalability, right? We need a design that allows us to ebb and flow, right? Triton as a 3-ton region is just going to keep ebbing and flowing. The other one I'd like to bring up is building security. We currently have a middle school main access and a high school main access and a lot of other access. We need to streamline that. And I look at Pentucket and other buildings that are redesigned. It would be a renovation of sorts, but I would love to have a single point of access into this building.
Yeah.
I think I've mentioned this to you, Kevin. I've mentioned to this committee a million times. I think the high school courtyard, if that were to become an enclosed space, thrown on the idea, is that become food services and all, the dining commons, and that is the access point. And then you've got your access right there to the end of the middle school. You've got your access to the high school, but that's fun to think about, new dining commons and all that. The big need is building security and access and streamlining that.
All right.
Just to piggyback on that too, I don't think that ends at the end of the school day, because one of the hardest things I think is those after school times and weekends and stuff like that, because right now you have third graders who are attending a basketball game and they pretty much have free reign of the building, because there's no way, right, to maintain security inside the building either.
That's a good point. Like we talked about with Pine Grove, is those kind of, I'm sure there's a design term for them, but you kind of chunk the building in regions. And so the doors lock and close and you can contain people. So part of that discussion about putting food services and dining commons up there is you've got both gymnasiums, food, dining would be there, and the auditorium. And could you somehow sequester that? Because 90% of the outside use is there, and keep everyone else out of the larger part of the building.
Yeah, so that's going to be an important part of our discussion is what kind of perimeters do we need to define, that we can lock down, as needed, after hours, weekends, whatever, depending on whatever's going on in the school building, after the school day. And we can manage that with, access control,
devices and security vestibules and, but that's going to definitely be part of the exercise.
You can keep raising your hand if you want to, Alicia, or you can just,
I
I think we're
knew
small enough.
margin.
Yeah.
You also, I also saw that the art room was small on both middle and high school. How small is that?
One of our art rooms is significantly small, the other is sized okay. I would say it's probably just a touch on the small side. But one of our art rooms, my understanding was when the building was built, was initially designed to be larger, and then they needed space for the nurse's art office, and they carved off a chunk of the space to put a nurse's office in. And so we're probably at least 200 to 300 square feet, if not more, small, maybe 400 square feet small in one of our 2 art rooms.
So
Is
I would
this-
say to that, thinking like very logistically and specifically, if the art rooms were to stay there, and who knows if they will, the nurse, it makes far more sense for the nurse to be part of a kind of administrative suite, so that the nurse, the support staff, even guidance are kind of all part of that core team. So you could capture that space back to give it to art if the nurse were elsewhere.
Patrick, is this the small art room? And is this the nurse
Do you-
that carved
do you
into
Oh,
wanna
it?
you're not
share-
sharing your screen
you
anymore.
wanna
Oh,
share
I'm
it,
sorry.
Maria?
Is it letting you?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. So is this the,
That's the small art room, yes.
okay, that makes sense
Mhm.
from what you said. Why is
Yeah.
that art room so tiny? Okay.
Yeah, and so like you can see, it's probably 2/3 the size of the other room.
Yes.
Yep.
And then you talk about unique programming, and based on the needs of our teaching staff and their talents, one of our art teachers is also running a metalsmithing studio downstairs out of our shop. We've got a section of our shop downstairs that so like that's something that's unique that we would want to keep access to, and would probably want to design differently if we were building it out. And we might say we want our art rooms in that area so that it's easier for us to function.
Is the wood shop used?
Yes. But that's a huge area where we have our wood shop, our tech lab, and then like you've got all the 3 of those orange spaces. The one furthest to the right is where our metalsmithing studio is, the middle is the wood shop, and the one on the left is the lab where we've got computers, 3D printers, and they're doing more engineering design and engineering tech. So that's a lot of space for the number of students that are going through there too.
Yeah, gone are the days where all that equipment is massive and huge. So there's I think there's a lot of space to capture there.
Mhm.
And I think also with the 2 art rooms, if we were to write that hole where it says the shared cafeteria space, back to that thing I keep talking about, I imagine it's probably really expensive to relocate a kitchen. I know it's right, if it's all new kitchen, it's new equipment, so it's not the equipment, it's the plumbing. But
Right.
I feel like that whole back cafeteria could just be removed, right? It's just an area that could be raised if we could figure out how to put that as part of like dining commons, as part of an entry that would be up next to the gym and the 2 gyms and the auditorium.
And then
Because
what would you use that space for? Just parking?
Yeah, I don't think there's ever going to be an extra, bad thing to say there's more parking spaces or more field space or rethinking it however it needs to be. Yeah, so if that were to the right of the high school gym and middle school gym with the auditorium, if you were to take what is the art wing in pink and green, you've captured a whole huge space that then puts the only missing piece is the library, right? Because when we talk about what gets rented, that becomes the public kind of third of the building. But the gyms, the auditorium, and then putting the food services and all of that in the same location and have that be the entry is an incredible efficiency of use. And then from a security, it allows us to kind of sequester off that section of the building. Because it's, I mean, yes, we do have people using classrooms. 90% of the rentals, as I said, is that those spaces.
So I have a question. What are the big white spaces?
Those are stuff on other levels.
Or
Uh,
or courtyards.
Or exterior courtyard.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I think in the, on this sheet, Julia, where you're waving there, that's the upper part of the library, if I'm not mistaken, right?
No, it's a courtyard.
That's a courtyard?
Yes.
Where's the library?
So that's
Like-
the one, yeah.
Ah, okay. Got it. Yeah.
The library is below here.
And do the courtyard spaces get used? Is that where the Arc used to be?
So those are truly outdoor courtyards, like literally.
Yeah.
Do they use them?
Some of them.
And when you say use them, I mean, it's
We have
like,
two that get used frequently and two that do not.
I think if those were designed as a design element, I think if those were more accessible
Yeah.
and had stairs where the concrete wasn't completely shredded on the ground and had doors that opened without
Yeah.
duct tape to have to reclose them to keep the rain out, I think those could be incredible academic spaces.
Absolutely.
For
Outdoor
what
teaching
purpose,
spaces.
though?
Oh,
I mean, I think it could be outdoor classroom space, any and all of the sciences. And then I think it could also be an opportunity where you build outdoor classrooms where the content is outside, and then an opportunity where you're taking a class that may not be science-based, but using it as an opportunity to be outside and hold a class outside. So when you see like outdoor classroom spaces, sometimes it's just literally set up like a classroom to be held in the outdoors when the weather's nice.
So it would only be used during good weather. I'm thinking winter time. It
Yeah,
wouldn't
so
be used?
it's like, I mean, when we talk the courtyard, that when you come in the main entrance of the high school,
Yeah,
when you're looking straight through into that courtyard,
yeah.
that's that one right there that Julia's just to the right
Okay.
of her. That's that courtyard. So it's literally like, I'm looking at it, it's shrubs and trees and grass, and
Yeah,
so it's just outside right now. It's just landscaped. So it would be re-landscaped. And in the process of doing that, we could think how we could make those educational spaces. It could be, you know, it's not ever bad to have kind of interior spaces where kids can hang out, where they can't get out entirely.
yeah.
And I think some of that was on the MLP report. Some of the teachers and students requested more outdoor space.
yes, I recall that.
Yeah, I love that as an idea, as a concept of, so those, yeah, all 4 of those X's are courtyards, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are all, there's one outside the cafeteria, and then that one, and then the one just to the lower right, that was where the one you go up a little to the right of the library, that's where the Ark was, Alicia,
Yeah.
where Dave Taylor's animals
Yeah.
lived.
Yeah. So I would say the one that's in the bottom right,
Mhm.
yep, there would be the one that I would say we have the most capacity to change its functionality. There's a greenhouse that's attached to the back of, or to one side of it on the lower level. But that whole area would make for a really nice lab, like extended lab space for science classes. So when we think
That's
about
what I
how
was
we're,
thinking. Yeah,
yeah, so when we think about how we're using spaces, like I definitely see the need for us to have some larger spaces, some common spaces, spaces that encourage discussion and debate, spaces that have greater access or functionality for like multimedia type spaces. We've got our TV production studio that's outside that I would love to be able to bring inside and make more of a focal point of our campus, with how many students participate in that programming, and how well done it is. You know, that would be something that would be great to kind of be able to bring inside and have a true studio that was built out inside, so kids get access to some maybe even higher level multimedia type production. You know, trying to think about what our tech ed spaces look like, you know, wanting that to not just be a traditional wood shop. I think, you know, based on who we have on staff, you know, I think we're more likely to be moving towards engineering than wood shop. You know, and so wanting that to be more of a design studio. You know, and I think that being something that's really kind of important for our for most of our classrooms, like our language spaces need to be designed in a way that facilitates students engaging in discourse and having a space within each hallway, maybe that that can be a shared or common space that classes can use or sign up for, that promotes dialogue and discourse. I think is really important. You know, based on some of the staffing reductions, we have a couple of spaces now that we're using as shared or common spaces for departments for the coming year. You know, and I think those, having that flexibility is really something that's essential. But the lack of square footage and the type of furniture in each room kind of limits some of what staff think about or do.
And what about the music program?
So our music program right now, I think we almost have we have more space than kids right now. Unfortunately, the room that's labeled there as high school music is not in great shape. You know, that's one of the
Right.
places where the roof
I
is in
remember
the worst,
seeing that, yeah.
is in the worst shape. But we've got that, and then the space that's to the right that's in that teal color as well. That's our choral room. But we've got those 3 spaces for 2 teachers, and they're 3 of the larger spaces in the building. You know, they could be designed differently and function slightly differently. You know, there are certainly things that are beneficial to be able to set up a music space for practicing choral versus practicing for a band. But I also envision a world in which we're operating our music program 7 through 12. And we have one of the 2 spaces set up for band and one of the 2 spaces set up for chorus. And then the 3rd space becomes something else.
Away from music, or?
Yeah, it could be an expansion of our theater program. That could be where we put our TV studio. It'll likely be something else in the arts. But I could see it, you know, I'm not sure in a school of, you know, combined campus of under 1,000, where our numbers are, that we need 3 of our largest spaces to be music, as opposed to having it be 2 of the spaces.
Sounds like they're underutilized.
Yeah.
I was going to mention the auditorium specifically, as you know, with that, and I know I've seen some. So I don't believe if we were partnered with the MSBA, they would approve an 850 seat auditorium, right? So we know that's way oversized per the MSBA specs, would be my guess. The design, but I think it's an opportunity for us separately to rethink that. I know in talking with Sue previously and Natalie Safley, the theater director, it's nice to have the backstage of a theater. I'm thinking of Pentucket. It's like all wide open, and then they kind of enclose the backstage. So you pull the backstage walls off, and you've got all kinds. I mean, they have a black box theater. It's incredible. But I know, the ability to pull a truck up to the backstage with prop, lumber and things like that.
Yep.
I would love to say, let's have that as an idea and as a focus. I don't think there's a way we're doing that unless we're knocking down on that picture that's on the screen. Actually, I think it's right where Julia's cursor is. Yeah, right. If you were to do something there and knock out that section of the building entirely, you would potentially have access. The backstage is the right side of the shared auditorium.
Yeah.
Seats are facing left to right as the screen is
But
oriented.
Brian, that's also 10 to 15 feet elevated.
That's 10 to 15 feet. What is?
Those classrooms that you're knocking out.
Yeah, it's like second story, 2 stories over
That's
there.
the second story.
I got you. Yes. Yes. Right. So you're losing 2 stories of
Yeah.
facility. So I'm not suggesting that's a solution, but yes, if we could figure out, I think a better use, I want to keep the auditorium, even if we're not, even if this were to partner with the MSBA at our expense. I think aside from our students, that would be a space. I mean, there's no air conditioning in there now. If it was a conditioned space, a modern performance center, I think we'd have all kinds of groups utilizing it. And I love the idea of, some of our elementary schools have used the space over there. I would love to figure out a way, and I hate the design. The current auditorium has the things where you can roll out the back half can get closed in, and then you can still, I would love to be able to shrink it in half, because an elementary performance may not be huge. So how could you make it maintained as an 850 seat auditorium, but also something that would feel a little more cozy if it was a performance at the elementary level and we would expect 400 people.
Mhm.
So I would love to think about that as a space that all of our schools would see as a resource. We keep talking about ways to get all of our students onto this campus. So if there's a way to use the theater and the auditorium toward that, I don't know what I don't know, but I would imagine we could be really creative with that space to make it attractive to a lot of different people, not just the middle school and high school students or programs.
So I would say the ways I could see doing that, Brian, because I've thought a little bit about it,
Mhm.
is the art classrooms that we've got. If those were moving somewhere else.
Yep.
You could have like some type of garage style door there that goes up, and you could put, like, maybe that's where some of our shop classes end up. Because I like, you referenced Pentucket, I like that they have their shop classes on the backside of their auditorium, so that they keep all of the tools in one space, and that they're building stuff and then it's going directly to its location.
Yeah.
Or the corner of the middle school by the entrance. So if that area that you are talking about moving the cafeteria to, Brian, if the cafeteria does go into that location, the corner right at the front of the building that's tan, all the way towards the left over there. Yeah, right there.
Okay.
If you were to put a hatch door there, and it's not necessarily what I want visually right in the front, but that's on the right level to be able to like take something directly into and down the hall into the auditorium.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it coming from that side, and especially if that was an open. I was thinking eliminating.
If we're reconfiguring the front of the building, that would be a great way to have the entrance. And if we're doing a true, like a singular entrance to the building being through the middle school entrance is the primary way in, the primary office suite, all that stuff. Then having that look a little different with a garage style or hatch style door gives you the ability to run straight down that hallway.
Well, you could also, if we're getting rid of the cafeteria and possibly shrinking the library, you could also come in that way.
You're just dealing with stairs there, Matt. Having to go upstairs or needing an elevator that brings you up. So I think what they look for in a lot of the auditoriums is to be able
Is
to
it
just
flat?
roll something direct into the backside
Right,
of the
at the,
stage.
at the stage level, yeah.
But we're also going to be able to get deliveries to the kitchen as well.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely need to be able to have deliveries to a kitchen. That's daily.
A lot of good ideas.
One of the things that I think a lot about is that our school, based on all, like, we've got all these cinder blocks, it feels like a bunker. And wanting the space, one of the things that came out really strongly from both the kids and the adults, wanting the space to be brighter, wanting the space to highlight more of our natural beauty that we've got in the area.
Yeah.
You know, being able to to make learning visible. I think that's one of the things that is hardest about our campus right now, is that it's very difficult to make learning visible. And to have kids be excited about the learning that they might see just walking down the hallway in someone else's classroom, because most of our rooms have a 4-inch by 1 foot sliver of a window that you can look into the room through.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I got you. That transparency. I think could be really exciting, especially for a classroom that's on the edge of a courtyard. You know, where you
Absolutely.
can really just kind of see right through to the outdoors.
Can I ask a question? So there's the middle school came online roughly, you know, late 90s, 2000. So all of those windows, doors were new in 2000, late 90s. The rest of the building on the windows I'm looking out, I know the frames date back to 1967. The glazing was updated in late 90s. Is there an argument? My thought would be, if we're redoing this building, we're replacing everything, even the 25-year-old stuff, so that we're starting back from that kind of MSBM mentality of, we want this to be a 50-year solution. If we had to reverse engineer it and say, okay, we're going to leave the windows in the middle school, but I would say, and I'd love to hear what other people think, I know that adds significant cost, but at the end of the day, the hope would be that we have a building that we're saying is the 50-year solution, and build our capital needs from the same starting point, or capital planning and needs, rather than saying, well, that section of the building, the windows are a little newer, and versus having a building that's entirely, again, we keep going back to Pine Grove, where everything, even different vintages, was replaced, so that you're starting from ground zero again with the planning and future planning.
Yep.
I think any project needs to include full envelope replacement and updating.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, there's also, you know, energy costs and operational costs to consider as well. So
Yeah.
if we have the opportunity to upgrade the envelope and make it tighter and increase the insulation values, you know, that's a good argument for, you know, energy cost savings and operations.
What about the gyms?
What about them? Like usability, or
Are we keeping two?
Brian's personal preference, and other people please chime in. I think we still operate two distinct schools. And so between athletics and high school gym classes, that high school gym, it's not always full, is routinely busy, and busy enough that it would be an impact on the middle school to try and schedule around if they didn't have their own space.
Okay.
That would be I don't know, Patrick, is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, they're used. I think the two gyms is actually one of the strengths of the building. And we have a tremendous amount of square footage there. I might be interested in using it differently. So in the middle of the two gyms, there's, because the bleachers go face back to back, and then there's the skinny closet in between them.
Mhm.
And I think if we were able to remove that skinny closet that's in between them and have a different type of bleacher solution, because I don't think we need all of those bleachers. We could theoretically have the square footage for what would feel like a pretty big field house, which is, you know, a fancier term for gym, but we might be able to run indoor track and field events out of our facility. Because we likely would have the square footage to do so. You know, and with different flooring, you know, that becomes all of a sudden a selling point that people are looking to rent out space for. It highlights one of our, you know, strongest athletic programs. You know, it just gives us a little bit of a different functionality of that space.
And I'm thinking like even Triton Youth Basketball to have the two separate spaces. And I hadn't even thought about that. Like if you look at that pink on the screen, that's a lot of real estate. And if that were to be one, and again, I'm not sure if those two gray columns are structural, but if that were, they're two separate vintages is the issue, right? The middle school was original. If there was a way to create one space with the kind of netting hanging down, so you had two full-size basketball courts side by side and then had all the others, that would, with the, you know, with the track around it, that would be incredible. Yeah, I think that would be an amazing usage to use the space. I think the kind of the alternative to that is if it came down to kind of figuring out space and we cost-wise, it was more efficient to only have one gym. Again, I think the gym functions as well, the high school gym. Could we capture some space for some other athletics type spaces? I don't know what you call, like, not athletics classrooms, but workout rooms or other places where there could be other physical education classes happening that wouldn't have to happen in the gym and still capture some space. But I mean, I think as a design, if we're talking about, you know, a painted on track for indoor field stuff, you're not talking about huge cost if you have the existing space. So that would be a tremendous benefit.
With some multi-purpose sports flooring.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that we've got that's problematic just in terms of usage. So on the picture behind the where the middle school gym is, you've got the gray box there, and then which is closet space, and then behind that is that part is actually should be split between our wrestling room and our workout room. And it would be far better for that space, both of those spaces, not to be on the interior and to be able to have windows that open, that has ceilings that are higher than 8 or 9 feet, and to have windows that open, because those are the most humid rooms in the building. And also, you know, have the highest likelihood of transmission of germs when kids are fully sweating in those spaces.
Probably under ventilated as well.
Yeah, so if we could have those spaces go towards some exterior point, that would be
that makes total sense.
What's that other pink space?
A
next to
locker
the
room.
music? Okay.
Top left corner there.
Yeah.
Would you need, do they use those lockers in locker rooms?
We use all of our locker rooms in varying amounts. That's our nicest of locker rooms.
And the kids do use them,
Yep.
unlike their school lockers.
Unlike their school lockers. Yeah, because they're changing for them for sports or
Ah,
changing for gym class, but predominantly it's changing for sports.
and they're male and female?
Yes.
Are there showers in there too? Is there a full like,
Yes,
yeah,
the showers desperately need to be updated in some of them.
And there's 2 locker rooms below that as well. I think we went on the tour, right?
Yep, there are locker rooms below and locker rooms above.
That was those were the ones we went down into there.
the dungeon?
Yep. So that whole area down below is lockers except for on the other side of that hallway, that's storage. So we have the training room, that's the pink, and then the gray around it is storage.
Is this a training room then?
On the other side of no, not that one, on the other side of the other hallway.
Okay.
Above the locker room, right? You're saying?
Yeah, above the locker room. Thank you, Brian, for
This
giving me
is
correction.
training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have 2 of them?
It's one room, it's slightly split, but it's athletic training. It's not a
That's
very
not a big
room.
space.
That is not a very big space, and so part of it has got, you know, the tables that the trainer's working on, and then the backside is where if a student's doing like something where they're working on stretching something out or strength building with the trainer, that they're doing it on the backside. So it's got a little bit of equipment in the back and a ice machine and then in the front of the tables.
So does that need to be bigger?
I would say 100% it needs to be bigger, and it would also be probably better if it was easier located to the where kids are playing, whether we make it closer to the fields or closer to the basketball court. You know, I don't know your thoughts on that, John, but maybe I would say probably closer proximity to the basketball court makes more sense.
Yeah, I think so.
And you have 3 locker rooms there?
Yes,
And then you have 1 more upstairs, so you really have 4 locker rooms?
It's actually,
5.
Upstairs and downstairs.
yeah,
There's
there's
more
Or
upstairs
this is
and
downstairs, so upstairs
Yeah,
and above.
so downstairs, because the kids separate out by team, but likely we don't need all of them if we're redoing spaces, you know what I mean? Because teams can share in season. The one that's in the roughest shape is the one furthest to the right. And that's the one that football and wrestling and lacrosse always want for whatever reason.
I always look at this corner of the building and feel like if there is any contender, aside from the cafeteria and moving it up front, I feel like this is the corner that just gets chopped off, right? And we start from scratch with the numbers of locker rooms and we saw the drains and the amount of work that it would take. Yeah, like, and then when you go back to, and I know it's 2 stories, so it's not, I think there's some space we don't need, i.e. 6, 7 locker rooms across all these floors that we could be more efficient with, or those, you know, shop spaces. When we look at the library, not only is the footprint huge, right? When we talk about the square footage, but it's also 2 stories. So you've got, if we were to make the library half the size it is now and make it the upper, and then put a floor in and make it the upper story, you have the entire first floor that could become all kinds of things. And if that wing then disappeared, that wing, that corner, that everything kind of from that hallway up and on over, and even just to the right of the bubble, I love your little design tools with the bubbles and the columns. Like even all the way over to the gray, like if all of that could disappear, then you have access to the backside of the auditorium too. Again, that's 2 stories. That's not easily done, but I feel like there's a lot of space in there that is either A, not needed like locker rooms, or B, is oversized like all the shop spaces. And I think there's a ton to capture in the library.
that back end where all those locker rooms are is actually 3 stories, right?
Yes, it is.
Oh, that's right.
Because you got locker rooms up top, you got the athletic director's office. I think, yeah, there's the girls' locker room up there,
Mhm.
and then the mezzanine above the band room.
That's right. Yeah, and again, a lot of unused space.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think
Oh, yeah,
that's
tons of it.
tons of unused space that could be repurposed.
I mean, one of the other things that, Brian, we say it's unused space, but one of the things that we're already desperate for is storage space.
Hmm.
And we do need places for storage as well. And if we chop off all of our extra space, we lose out on any potential for storage. And then,
But even like if we were to, if Julie, if you can go back to the library, is that the library?
There you go.
Right? I mean, if you take off the cafeteria, you then have that middle courtyard that's white there just below the cafeteria. And all of that library space, if you're capturing that and rebuilding what we're not, right, I'm not saying knock it down and don't use any. I'm saying, can we capture existing library space and then even using, I don't know, you have to think about outdoor windows and stuff like that, but all of that space in between, kind of just north of the library, if that could be utilized, filled in, that could be 2 stories of additional usable space in the existing footprint where we're not going outside the footprint. Yeah.
You're saying use that courtyard, is what you.
I'm saying use the courtyard, somehow fill it in, like we were talking about putting the cafeteria and food dining services over in the entrance courtyard, rethinking that.
Yeah.
Could again, the library make it 2 floors? You only probably need 1/2 to 3/4 of 1 floor of the library to make it still a really big library. And then you could, if you did that on the second level, you have the whole first level of the library as well. And you could use that for shop space and all kinds of other things.
The only thing you lose there is natural light, right?
and access to the exterior,
That's what I'm
right?
thinking.
Like it's good to be able to wheel stuff in and out of a shop.
Yeah.
And it's good, especially with where our metalsmithing studio is, to be able to have access to the exterior for ventilation. I mean, we need ventilation for all, but from a fire standpoint.
Yeah, it could be like if we were to utilize that current courtyard that's white between, above the library, below the cafeteria. If that was on the first level, stuff that needed outside access, you still could accomplish that.
Yep.
But I agree. You don't want to box it all in so there's no window access. I think if we could figure out how to get the library, I think I mentioned this already, like the library up on the second floor and close to the auditorium, because it's right next to the auditorium. Right, that's basically, if it was basically that space there, that would be incredible, an incredible way. Oh,
Is this what you mean? Oh,
Yes.
yeah, sorry, we lost Kevin. He's coming back.
yeah, he lost his mic, so
Oh, okay.
he left a minute ago and was trying to come back in. But I think you're saying, could this be the library?
Yeah, so that's currently the library.
It's the roof of the library, correct?
Open air space, yeah. That's what.
Open air, yeah. That's the library footprint. But if that was
Yes.
on the second story, and that's to the right of that is guidance.
Yep.
Like if that were captured as the library, you now have both of your gyms, your auditorium and your library connected with your food services.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think that takes it up to 97% of all community use.
Can you hear me now?
We
Yeah.
got you, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. I lost my camera and mic, but okay.
We got you now.
See and hear you again.
All right.
And maybe not, maybe other people disagree with that, but I feel like if we could get the library in better proximity.
I think it's smart, yeah.
Would it be an option to put the library on the bottom floor instead and the cafeteria on the top floor?
Oh, so not put the cafeteria in the
Hmm.
courtyard, but put it. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I'm just thinking if you essentially split that library into a first floor, second floor, I'm wondering, I would, I mean, if you're gonna say putting everything together, I would have putting the cafeteria closer to the, auditorium and gym access as a higher priority than having the library there.
The challenge with putting a cafeteria on an upper floor is the deliveries. I mean, you're getting deliveries every day to the kitchen. And you'd be relying on a, freight elevator, I think, probably to get the deliveries up to the cafeteria.
Yeah.
Well, you'd be main level, but on the front end of the school, right, instead of the back.
Yeah, and I was
If we
thinking that,
moved it to the courtyard.
yeah, I was thinking the cafeteria would be the existing courtyard, right? So that would become what is existing currently between out at the front of the building to the right of the gymnasiums. That we're capturing existing concrete courtyard. Yeah, so that like I'm pointing with my
So is this the cafeteria?
No, Julia, on the bottom, just to the right of the high school gym, there's an outdoor courtyard. Nope, go back
same
down a
slide,
level,
yeah.
or upper level, right there.
So
Just to the
bottom
right of
left, to the right of the
right of the high school gym.
Yeah.
Oh, right here.
So
Right.
it doesn't exist. It's an open courtyard right now. That's the entry courtyard.
Yeah.
But what
Yeah.
I would say is be capturing that existing outdoor space to be the cafeteria. Again, you have to figure out where the kitchen goes, where all the accessibility.
Mhm.
And I think if then that you then have the cafeteria there, the auditorium there, and if the library could come up to that floor as some part of the existing library footprint, you've got all of them on the same floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we could, I mean, so again, the thought would be if that, again, in that space as well, you've got your access into the building as well, because you've got the access to the middle school to the right there and then into the high school. So to
Yeah.
bring those office suites, the high school office suite is there, but bring the middle school office suite to that end of the building as well. And you end up with kind of an access. And then the question would be, is there a way to
Yeah.
get
I
us?
mean, as an adjacency diagram, it makes sense. I think that what I'm struggling with that concept is how do we load the kitchen?
Yeah,
Without, you want to load the kitchen directly from the exterior and not have to bring material, down a corridor or through the school.
right.
What about your central office, Brian? Is that full?
It's a good question. Patrick has been planning a conquest for at least the last 4 years.
Is this the central office
Yes.
or another building? Okay.
Yes, that is the entire district operates from that tiny little square footprint. The way we have utilized that space is
From half of that,
Yeah,
really,
high school was half of it too, right?
half of
Yeah.
it is central office, half of it's the high school office.
yeah, the gray.
Don't you have a water feature in your office? I thought it was.
I do, yes.
It's a private bathroom, isn't it,
That's
Brian?
on those. The bathroom isn't the water feature. The windows are the water feature.
Matt, I've got the water feature too.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I like the cafeteria in the front, but I think loading is going to be a big issue.
I agree.
And I don't know how to do it to make it work. And it might be.
Again, we're getting into bigger costs when we're moving, but could the cafeteria behind the middle school gym where all of those
Yeah.
3 levels of locker rooms and spaces that we're saying are
Yeah.
beyond repair and model.
Can you open all this up?
Could that be the
Potentially.
cafeteria?
Could be,
Yeah,
could be.
bring it into the existing footprint. Yeah, that square. And if you could then figure out a way to get rid of the stuff to the right of that, you've got the outside access to the auditorium and the outside access to the cafeteria.
I don't know.
You don't like it?
No.
Don't like location, meaning?
Yeah, I don't think the location works.
Do you
Sounds
think,
if you move-
expensive to me.
It's a little remote.
yeah.
It's
What if you move-
exactly, so it's remote. I think it becomes really screwy with the exterior ground level. And I think it takes away an area that quite frankly, we need some of what's in that area.
Mhm.
Like whether it's locker rooms, the maintenance space, like we need to figure out where a lot of that space goes, and that's okay. We're not making decisions today. But we can't get rid of our maintenance shop in the process. Like
Mhm.
John's guys would be
Yeah, we'd be in a little bit of trouble.
You can move to central office too.
Water features. Oh,
This is exactly the type of conversation that I was hoping that, we have. I mean, we're not gonna solve any of this, here in the meeting, but we're hearing a lot of, ideas, right? About how we could potentially reconfigure the building. And that's what we do. That's what Julia and I do, is we listen, we take these ideas and we try to, make it work, right? By looking at it in a little bit more detail. So I like all these ideas. I think they're all worth looking at.
Two
So-
quick things I just wanted to throw into the cafeteria conversation that I also think you'd have to reroute the entire parking lot if you want to make that work for a drop-off location, because otherwise you're gonna have buses and drop-off trucks, which that
Won't meet.
I don't
they
know how
don't
that,
match.
yeah, I don't know how that would work, just given the current parking lot flow. And then I guess this is a side tangent, but I think it's an easy thing to start planning for. But it's a question I have. I assume you want to get rid of the outbuilding, Patrick, which is totally not represented on this plan at all.
The which building are you referring?
we have an outbuilding, I thought it was.
I think is it this utility building?
That's the boiler plant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
No,
there's
it's
another
basically
one,
He is.
yeah, so it would be to the right of the cafeteria, kind
Oh,
of where it says administration.
yep, we
It's
don't,
up there.
right.
And so we have a history class and PE classroom, and our TV studio is out there.
And a seasonal bathroom, right?
And
Or
a
is that-
seasonal bathroom. And I would love to, I mean, from a school safety standpoint, it'd be great not to have that, because right now we're dependent on the door sensors functioning properly and, going off when classes are going, in between passing times for it to work correctly. So it'd be great to bring those back in.
Would that building as locker rooms make more sense?
Yes. Yes and no. It'd make more sense, Matt, for spring and fall. And we do have the outdoor locker room that visiting teams use, especially for football, over in the stadium. But it would be great to have lockers out there for that point in time, and to keep some of that mess outside. Brian might also have designs on building central office out there.
I mean, we've talked about it as a, right, out of all the things that need to be in this building, we are the least important to be in the envelope of this building. So I like existing in a school rather than being off on our own and we forget what we do. But yeah, I mean, if it made more sense that this office space becomes something else and that space gets repurposed, I was gonna say I can just reshare.
Mhm.
I'll right, so this is,
You want me to stop sharing?
I think it'll bump you.
Okay, okay, cool.
Right, so this is the overview, north orientation. So this is the
Mhm.
building we're talking about, cafeteria, gyms, middle school. It's this building right here. So
Oh,
not huge. You'll remember it, Kevin, from being out here.
yeah,
I believe the thinking when it was built was they needed temporary space. And in the decision of creating some temporary space, I don't remember the dollar value. They said, hey, for a little bit more, we can make it becomes a permanent space. It's got that kind of blue, I think it's raceme, aluminum roofing. And it became a space, like we said, a kind of classroom on each end
yep.
with adventure ed and some outdoor bathrooms. So, but if that were to be repurposed as central office, certainly something to consider. If that made the most economic sense. I mean, we have.
Needs a serious upgrade before it's ready for that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, it'd have to be remodeled. I mean, I have needs, but but I mean, it's a basic structure. So could it become a
Yeah.
2-story building and then right? We don't have a lot of. The nice thing about central office is we need square footage and cubicles, right? I mean, we're people sitting in offices. We're not with a conference room with some presentation capabilities. We're not needing to be set up like a lab or a lot of other educational spaces that need more thoughtful setup. So I would say we're low need. Maybe people don't agree, but I think
Masconomet is similar. They have their administration building is just detached.
yeah, it's kind of tucked into the back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think then if that were to be a discussion, the issue is that people are coming to visit in central office. How are they getting back there? Right now from a security standpoint, they're checking in the high school office. They swipe in through the Raptor system. They get their badge. They come in. They meet with us. Perfect scenario. Doesn't always work perfectly. But right, I mean, as far as and being in a separate building, it'd be nice to be able to say, right, we're not a security issue. You can just come in, you meet with us. There's a parking lot right there. That doesn't necessarily accomplish that sitting there square in the middle of the campus with no real way. I don't want people driving, right? This is only emergency access, so we don't want people driving through there. And I don't think we want to get into rethinking where all the fields are.
No.
Mm-mm.
I mean, I certainly think, as we talk about this, we should be talking about, are there any upgrades needed as part of a project? For sure. But I don't think we should be talking to the level of let's repurpose a stadium or, I think we always talk about this end field is underwater most times. Is there a way to do work on make that useful or maybe not? Or so I think having those discussions. But I don't think we're reworking where fields are located and stuff like that.
I agree.
Big money.
If we're doing a project, we should be thinking about the turf and redoing the turf.
I agree. Yep.
No one wants to hear it, but the life expectancy on turf is 10 years.
Yeah.
And I want to say we're on year 8 or 9.
So where's Triton Ed Foundation in all of this? Why aren't they fundraising?
They never did. I mean, they tried to fund the for the stadium and didn't, they raised 100,000 in a few years. That was my mistake in saying that we would utilize the field and with building rentals,
Right.
that fund and have the fund to be able to replace the track is every 7-8 years. We're definitely in need of a track resurfacing. That's I think a couple 100,000. The carpet, they say, is 10 to 12 years. We actually have a company that does the maintenance 4 times a year. Just saw them here yesterday, and that's extended the life. It still looks great for 9 years old. But it is something to discuss for sure. So the hope was to have that revolving account from the building use to put towards that routine maintenance.
Yeah,
And
that never materialized.
everyone built a field. So no one wanted to rent it anymore. So,
Oh,
yeah. So,
All right.
Can I ask
Other-
a random side question? This is a Julie and Kevin question, I think. Right now, I believe most of the classrooms have univents in them.
mm,
If I'm assuming that a modern HVAC system wouldn't require those, do we regain any square footage by removing those, or are those calculated as part of the square footage already?
Yeah,
or other possibility, do the unit ventilators stay? Do those get retrofitted?
I think that if we were going to do a renovation on the scale that we're talking about, and we were staying with that concept, we would replace the equipment, certainly. Unit ventilators are notorious for having short lifespans. So the classrooms have a high ventilation load. You know, we need to bring fresh air, and we would, under the current codes, we would need to bring in quite a bit more air than we have right now. And the easiest way to do that is to bring it in directly from the outside. But that equipment, those unit ventilators, they're problematic. They break, the dampers get stuck. Nobody likes them. So we could consider a different approach where we do it with ductwork through the building, and potentially get rid of those unit ventilators, and maybe we can capture a couple feet at the classroom. And I don't know if Julie, if we got to that level of specificity when we did our measurements.
no, and I'm using the measurements from the MLP.
Right. For consistency,
But we could look at
could
look at their classrooms and do another calculation.
Yeah, I don't know if now's the right time to do something like that.
Yeah.
That's probably further down the road.
Yeah, I think that is further down the road.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to look at that from a kind of the matching up with the MSBA standards. I think the question is,
it's not worth doing.
yeah, it's the cost benefit. So at Pine Grove, they brought in ducts, and then in every
Yeah.
classroom, I feel like it's in a stack, right? And it's a return at the top and a supply at the top or whatever. And then they did, radiant heating over the windows and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think Narissa's point being, do we move away from the univents and into something like that really does solve the problem long term and bringing actual circulated air
We
for
could
both heating and cooling.
we could consider that. I think we also want to when we get to that level, is thinking about how the boiler plant fits into the picture, right? So that's a supply of hot water, and that hot water can be used for the unit ventilators, but it can also be used for fan coil units, for example, that go up in the ceiling. They're concealed, we don't see them, and then the air gets heated and cooled and distributed above the ceiling level. So there's a couple of different ways to do it, but we do have a piping in place. It may be in the older section, if it wasn't all replaced in 2000, I think we'd want to maybe look at the documents again. If it was not replaced, the piping, is oh gosh, it would be over 50 years old, right? And that's the time when you really want to start thinking about replacing that as well, right? Because it corrodes, it fails, more leaks, more problems.
Yeah.
A couple other thoughts just in terms of like how we use spaces and what would be great
Can I say before
educational.
you go there, Patrick, can I just say, I think as an assumption, I would like to make the assumption that we're upgrading the building. And I know what we did at Pine Grove is we didn't air condition all the spaces. What was the word I'm looking for? The dehumidifiers, right? So it's the dehumidification, which really does make a difference when you're taking the moisture out of the air. It really does feel 5 to 10 degrees cooler.
Yeah.
So I would love to have that be the assumption as a starting point to say we're getting rid of univents and we're bringing in real heating and at least dehumidification. And then I think we cooled, all the year-round spaces, the offices, the large gathering spaces, the auditorium, with actual mechanical cooling.
Yeah. Agree, absolutely. When we talk about infrastructure improvements, we're talking about things like the heating, ventilation, air conditioning, electrical distribution, fire, all of that.
Okay, cool. So I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, that when we're not staying with univents, we're actually bringing it forward with a full redesign. Cool. Patrick, what were you saying? Sorry to
Yeah,
cut
I was going to say other things, thinking about in terms of how we're using educational spaces and what we might need. Space for teacher collaboration, I think, is really important. If we want teachers to be doing creative things, we need to give them nice spaces to be working together in. Currently, their prep rooms that they have for departments are small and a little bit dingy closets.
Yeah.
And so having larger spaces that they can work in collaboration and in conjunction with one another,
Sure.
I think makes a lot of sense. I know some schools have gone to a model where like teachers don't have necessarily a desk in their classroom. They have a common workroom that the whole department has, and then you have a workspace in there and they're going out to collaborate and work in those spaces. That's also another way, Narissa, where you free up some square footage in a classroom. If you take out the teacher desk from it, you all of a sudden buy an extra, usually 100, 150 square feet, just by the shape of the desk and the space directly around it. But having nice collaborative workspaces for each department would be wonderful. Thinking about our arts, we've talked a lot about, or a little bit about music. And I would like, our middle school music rooms got very little light, because when it was designed as a dance studio, I want to say. And so kind of switching some of the functionality there, but also thinking about for our visual arts, having a way to showcase some of our student work a little bit better. I've seen a couple of schools that have studios where they're doing regular displays of student work, and the department is constantly showing off and highlighting in a space that can be also a public space, some of the art of the students, or they have a community member come in and put up an art show in the space. If we're wanting to highlight creativity and some of the aesthetic beauty that we've got in the area, I think that's a nice way to go about thinking and doing it. And then wanting classrooms to be able to be I'm trying to think of the right word, like flexible in a way. So wanting the design of them and it might be more about what goes inside than what stays on the outside, but wanting them to be flexible and multi-purpose. So like some of the science labs you see now have movable furniture that can, you can move, and you've got some of the lab benches around the room, but even those lab benches are movable. And really what's fixed is where the gas comes in and where the water goes out. But everything else you can shift. And so just thinking about how we can keep some of the spaces flexible so that we're not creating a new building where learning happens how it did 50 years ago with 20 kids staring at a teacher at the front of the room. So I think those rooms have to be designed in a way that's that's flexible and multi-purpose.
Understood. And that suggests, you know, that departure from antiquated teaching practices and applying, you know, 21st century practices. That suggests that some of these spaces want to be a bit bigger than
Yes.
are to allow for that flexibility, because, you know, if we're talking about furnishings, and I think it largely is about furnishings that you move around and reconfigure, you need a little room to do that. You know, that's a bit bigger than your typical classroom.
And it might be that we're making a decision about whether or not we want increased square footage for every room, knowing that some teachers will then have to share classrooms versus every teacher having their own classroom space. Right? You have the same argument that happens over parking spots in places where you don't have enough parking spaces. Like, you can always assume 10% of the people on any given day won't be there and you can have overage, or do you want to have every person have their own space that's dedicated to them? You know, I think we can assume that we have 10%, 15% of the spaces that are unused for teaching in a given period. If we have nice big prep rooms that are designed for collaboration, and we tell teachers, we want you to use these and work with your colleagues, and the classrooms are going to just be spaces that we're sharing, but they're going to be large and outfitted in a way that's exceptional. It changes some of the dynamic there. And it changes our discussion about, should we be taking down walls in places? Because we can go from 3 classes to 2, have a huge space, and then know that 3 teachers are going to share 2 rooms, or whatever the math works out to.
So I'm hoping that you guys can come up with some innovative solutions that really can turn this, I won't say antiquated, I'll say dated school, into something that the Triton district can be really proud of, because
Me too.
yeah, it's gonna be a sell. For the 3 towns are gonna have to really sell it to get the public buying it, and that's not easy up here.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the word that comes to mind for how I would characterize this effort is it needs to be transformational, right? I mean, we really need to just kind of reimagine it so that it's not hard to sell. You know, I'd like to, and I don't know if now is the right time to do it, is to try to start thinking about some of the big block ideas, right? Not looking at room to room, but looking at the big blocks. You know, but potentially relocating the cafeteria, getting access to, you know, the backstage. There's a lot of ideas that were thrown out today. We're taking notes. I think it's going to take us a little time to collect these notes and digest them, but I think that there's some big block adjacency type diagrams that we could potentially come up with to show, you know, relationships between the major parts of the program, or what they could potentially be. And I'd also like for Julia and I think it would be a good use of time for us to get a look at Pine Grove and Pentucket potentially, you know, just to see some examples that everyone's familiar with. I haven't been there. Julia, I don't think you've been there.
No, I haven't.
So maybe you know, we can plan a little field trip, and then and we can certainly take another walk through Triton while we're there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I'm friends with the superintendent at Pentucket, so they're always happy to give you a extensive tour if you would like it.
Yeah. I think that would be very helpful for us to do that. And, you know, maybe we can try to get that scheduled.
Yeah, I would love that.
And if potentially when class is in session, I think would be better to see, how it's actually being used. We've spent a lot of time walking around empty schools in the summertime, and it really just doesn't,
Yeah,
it
doesn't
doesn't
show.
paint the picture at all as to how it's being used, so.
Great.
For athletic
So-
facilities, I think maybe Ipswich as well, just because
Mhm.
I think they have a lot of what I've heard mentioned here today. Like having the indoor track with the gyms, they have rigid walls, which are a bit different, and I think hearing more about like locker room locations and stuff like that, I think their facilities are the most similar to what I've sort of heard envisioned here today.
Yeah.
So is there any way to get a high level budget? Because I think we have three options: either go with the MSBA, do a complete renovation on our own, or just do repair on our own. Is there any way to get a budget for at least those last two options?
I
Do you
think
want a
that
is at a
budget,
certain-
Matt, or do you want a cost estimate?
Just want like an estimate. Sorry, like just a high level estimate, because I think there's a certain number where we can just stop. We're not going to be able to get it passed.
Right.
Yeah, I think that this exercise will lead to that. So the goal was that by the time we get to, late fall, when we're hearing from the MSBA, it's all of that data to say, here's our options. We can just fix what's broken, or we can for this much money, we can rethink it for this much money, or we can go partner with the MSBA, and then we have to put everything on the table and think about all the possible options. I think these exercises, ultimately, in my conversations with you, Kevin, right, that will lead to a high level cost estimate, not a detailed budget. But I think we have to
Right,
first
and
say,
I
what's
do
possible.
think it's important for us to see, at least for me to see.
Yep.
I like the idea, Brian, of moving things around and moving the cafeteria here and doing all that, making it more efficient and innovative and blah, blah, blah. And listen, I'm all for that. But these kids can't live the way, and you guys can't work the
Yep.
way you've been living.
Yep.
So if the cafeteria needs to stay where it is because it's too much money to move it, then so be it.
Yep.
And get us new windows, get us new floors, you know what I mean? Get us some adequate spaces. I
Absolutely.
guess that's kind of where I'm going with it.
Alicia,
Yeah.
on the cell part of it, I think the message that I've been sharing with folks is that the building's not gonna last 10 years out from now.
That's
Right.
what I'm hearing.
We need a roofing project in the next couple of years if
Yep.
we're not already going, on a larger scale project, because the roof won't make it another
Right.
10 years.
So I guess time is of the essence.
So for people to start hearing, no matter what, it's a $20 million roofing project as a floor.
Yeah.
Bad pun.
Correct, right?
No, but I know what you mean.
Yeah,
So I
but-
think this
I
was
think-
what,
I think you have to be careful about tossing out any
Yeah.
numbers, but especially a lowball number like that, because what people will hear in that, Patrick, is I heard $20 million. Why is it now all of a sudden this number?
Listen,
Because
that
they
happened to
don't
us.
listen carefully enough to differentiate those
That
things.
happened to
That's
us
fair.
with
That's fair
the
enough,
town
yeah.
hall project, with the police station rather. Oh
Yeah.
no, we can get two of them done for 6.5. Somebody, not me, threw that number out. And they can't get anything done for 6.5, and we still don't have a town hall.
Yeah, just to
I
like,
think-
so this has been the process, right? This is what we're moving towards numbers for sure. That was the charge in working with H&A, was to be able to say, here's our options, and options are both very high level concepts and high level kind of costs, so that we can make that decision. So I don't know if Kevin, you wanted to jump in. I know you were saying something. I feel like I heard someone else talking.
Yeah, no, I was actually just looking back at the report to see what the value of the roof was. I mean, it was.
You're like right around 62 and change.
No, just the roof was.
But it's
Oh.
more than just a roof. It's
And
roof
then-
and windows.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
mechanical.
Yeah.
Well,
And
altogether,
mechanical.
we were at 50.
Bare minimum. That's what we have to
something.
do, bare minimum.
Yeah, we were over 50 million for everything. Went
Mhm.
back when we did the study.
But yeah, I mean, my initial discussions with Brian about, what we could do here, and it was always leading towards developing some kind of a budget. And I use the term budget. Budget and estimate, in my perspective, aren't interchangeable terms. I use budget because we're really at the conceptual level here. But I think that, we can do some order of magnitude estimating as to what we think, this might be worth to build. A true cost estimate requires a much higher level.
Oh,
of
yeah,
effort
much
and
more work and
detail.
use more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that we can do that at a high level, and that's the goal.
Because
Okay.
my goal, I don't know, Narissa, if you agree, in December when we find out whether if we were accepted or not, I'd like to make the decision to go with Plan B or C, or pursue that immediately.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
that was the charge that the committee gave to me, is saying, when we hear, we need to be ready to roll with our next step. And what we can't do is, all right, let's go back to the drawing board and figure out what we're going to do. It needs to be, all right, it makes sense to say yes to the MSBA, or no, we have another viable option. And if that's the case, I think we're jumping quickly to actually going out to bid to find an OPM and a designer, and moving forward to spend what we've saved for a feasibility study to start designing right away.
So when is our next meeting? When can you guys have some preliminary stuff for us to look at again?
So is the next, Kevin, in the process and listening to you, that you called it a big block, right? Kind of does that make sense to have a meeting after you've kind of thought through these concepts to say, yes, we can move this here, do this here. I don't think that's as long a meeting. And then say, okay,
Yeah.
great, keep going with that. Does that sound like a next?
That was my thinking, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that a 1 month, 2 month?
Let's say three weeks.
Okay.
3
So
weeks.
let's say, I like that answer.
Yeah.
So we'll target, kind of look at mid-September. Do we want to do that while we're on the call, or do we want to do a doodle poll?
Probably do a doodle poll, because it'd be nice if the other two towns had representatives.
Yes, okay.
So I'm out of town for pretty much the whole month of September. I'm not back until like the 23rd. So Tracy can pinch hit for me. I can fill her in.
I was gonna say, what are we now? We're at 1, 2, 3 weeks from today is September 6th. We could target, I can pull all 3 weeks just to see, because it's awful trying to find dates and times. But I'll pull,
Well, I can do the same time, 12:30 on the 6th. Just write that down for me, Brian. Other than that, it's gonna have to be Tracy.
okay.
It's gonna be later than the 6th. Because I won't even be in this country.
I don't know if it was made public, Brian, but you have a tentative on the school committee calendar for the 13th.
Tentative. So that was, yes, we threw those out there as dates. We had said Friday mornings. And I think, Kevin, since we did that, you said Friday mornings actually are not great, because you tend to have standing meetings with teams and stuff.
I have a standing meeting every weekday morning, but that's usually wrapped up by 9:30.
Okay. So, I mean, yeah, so on the calendar is Friday the 13th. Wow, did I just say that out loud? Friday the 13th at 10 o'clock. And again, we had originally said, let's meet in person. I think we're talking about another Zoom meeting. I can say, I would rather, Brian speaking, I would rather pay for Kevin and Julia's time to be doing tours of buildings and not driving to Triton for a quick meeting. So, so that's 4 weeks
So
from today.
include Tracy on that one, because I won't be here.
Okay.
I'll tell her.
All right. So Matt and Narissa, that works for both of you?
Yeah,
Works
I
for
have
me,
it
yeah.
on my calendar.
Okay. Then hopefully it's on Caitlin's calendar too, and hopefully she can be here. Kevin and Julie, would that work for you Friday the 13th at 10 a.m.?
It works for me.
Okay.
Julie, I think your mic's off.
I think I am out then. but I don't know if I need to be here.
I think, I think we can cover it. It'd
Okay.
be great if you were, but, we can certainly present it.
All right, so let's say that my crew, we're looking at Patrick, John, Brian, that looks okay on our end? Okay. All right, we have a 10, wow, that was way too easy compared to this last meeting. I'll get a message out to the whole crew, hold Friday the 13th. We're gonna come back and review some big block design ideas. And what was the test you called? It was a really cool word. It's like a fitability test or something like that.
S-fit?
S-fit, you were talking, no, you're talking about like the way things fit together.
Adjacency.
Adjacency.
Jason, that was I like that. Ooh,
Adjacencies, what
we'll look at
needs
some
to be next
adjacency
to what?
issues.
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So is
All
that
right.
a good stopping point for today?
I
All
think
right.
so.
Do you want to officially call the
Can I get
meeting?
Yeah, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I will make that motion.
Second, roll call vote, Narissa,
Yes.
and I'm a yes.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Brian,
Okay,
can you just hang on for one
see you all.
second? If
I can.
everybody else can go, I just got a really quick question for him. And
Sure
Matt, if
thing.
you want to stay on, that'd be great.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everyone.
everyone.
Take care.
Did you say?